every day. He recovered after about 6 hours. He was completely back to himself again. And then after 2 weeks for his contributions to science, we set him free. So he's back in the ocean having babies out there. His name's Roscoe. They wrote a country song about him. It's true, they did. So then what we did is we proceeded to do the experiment again and again and again, and then we tested again all the different variables. So we cooked the lobsters, and then we had my father there, would eat the lobsters, and he was a retired Episcopal minister. I knew he'd never been exposed to cannabis before, so there was no danger of that being in his system. There was no carryover. And then we tried copious amounts of lobster to see if, well, what if he lacked, if he get any. Still no carryover. So you're exposing the lobster to a small amount of it. It's actually a large amount of it for a very short period of time. So just a couple minutes with a very high dose, but it's not enough for it to build up in their system. They're getting cooked immediately, and they're getting, hey Kevin, Zach, they're getting cooked at such a high temperature that there's no carryover anyway, there's no way. So the really neat thing is you're sedating this lobster with no downside. It's not harming the lobster in any way, it's actually putting them to sleep. And so the difference is something you can literally taste because they don't have a stress hormone. So the meat is sweeter, it's lighter, it's better because it's lacking the stress hormone. So we did that, discovered that, and then the federal government stepped in and said, hey, even though cannabis is legal in the state of Maine, on a federal level, it's still illegal. So, and all restaurants fall under a federal umbrella, so you can't do anything that's against the federal law and still keep your licenses. So, and it's catch-22 because you can't test it in their facilities to show them that there's no carryover because the cannabis is illegal on a federal level. So you can't prove it to them and you can't do it. So I asked if we could see their list of what they do approve, and there's a certain irony.
Your order.
It's called the GRAS list, generally recognized as safe. That's the FDA's, yeah, I know, I saw it. I was like, that's actually pretty funny. But when you go through their list and you go through the FDA's approved list, you find some really good things on there as well. There are plenty of terrifying things, and you wonder how is that ever even allowed in food? But when you go through that, there were things like valerian root. And valerian root is, you can buy it anywhere, you can even buy it at Walmart. It's kind of the same basis as chamomile tea, and pharmaceutical companies use it to make Valium. So they'll use it in large amounts, do some alterations to it, then they make the Valium. But lobsters, just as the valerian root is by itself or in a tincture, just a glycerin-based tincture, they love it. They absolutely love it. So they're getting a great last meal. They're also getting sedated. So it has about the 75% effectiveness rate over the cannabis. The cannabis is 100%. I'm wearing my wool hat today, so it's being a little hot. Cannabis is 100%. The valerian is about 75%. You still get a very sedated lobster. The upsides to it as well are it's very quick. So their stomach is directly behind their mouth. So when you give them the valerian, they're affected within 5 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds. Cannabis is 3.5 to 5 minutes. CBD is an hour and a half to 2 hours, and it lasts for about 45 minutes. And we were able to try all of these neat things because when it was world news, it was literally one of the top stories in the entire world for a period of weeks. It was covered on every continent, in every country. It was even written up, it's written in Farsi and in Israeli, something, whether it's in the Jerusalem newspaper, it was on the Swiss news, the BBC did an hour-and-a-half piece, NPR did a 45-minute piece, it was on all of our local stuff in the USA, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, The View did it, Comedy Central did it, I'm trying to think of the guy's name, it's escaping me what
Jon
his
Stewart?
name is. No, it'll come to me. But anyway, it was widely covered. So when it was on NPR, there was a company called CBDMD. They're one of the largest CBD producers in the United States, and they sent us a bunch of their big samples. They're like, look, we've got these bottles you sell for like $500 each. It's really concentrated. You know, we'll gift these to you. Try these things out. So we had opportunity to try all kinds of different stuff, which was great. But the CBD for the lobsters takes a long time. It doesn't work for these methods. Valerian, again, kind of a blessing because it's very fast, totally legal, makes a huge difference for the lobster. So we did that. So we started in 2018 using the valerian root. And then have done that all of this time. And then at the beginning of this summer, I get a call from Organic Farmer magazine. They said, hey, how do you feel about the University of Southern California redoing your experiment? And total news to me, because they never contacted us. I don't know how you can recreate somebody's experiment unless you have all the variables, you know, because otherwise you're doing something similar maybe, but there's no recreation of it. But they claimed they were recreating ours. They didn't use cannabis, they used a vape pen cartridge. They used an hour-and-a-half exposure time instead of a 3 to 5 minute. They used a very low dose. Anyway, they botched the entire thing completely. They couldn't have botched it anymore, but they still got results. So when they botched it and still got results, it became world news again. So then it gave it some more oomph and credibility. It actually was even part of what went into the decision-making process for the United Kingdom when they changed their laws about 8 weeks ago. So in the UK now, it was in front of Parliament. It is illegal to boil a lobster to death without sedating it in some fashion first. You cannot any longer. So that happened. This had a little something to do with that. Switzerland has had it for several years now that you can't boil. Now their processes are a little different. They go with the method of, well, you can stab it in the head and this is a terrible idea. A lot of places do that. It's awful because they have a basal ganglia. They don't have a brain. Whole different nervous system. Everything is different. So all you're doing is you're adding a head wound to its list of woes, and then you're putting it into boiling water. So the thing is, the valerian, it's extremely effective. And the cannabis, again, even more effective. Both of these work, but the big takeaway from it is if you can do this for a lobster, which is the least of these, maybe, you know, in our thinking, that it'll work for any animal. It'll work for anything that's in our food chains. You just have to alter the process for each one. So if you can do something with no downside, where it's sedating them, and again, without a downside, you're making the world a better place, really. Just even on the smallest levels, you know, what's going into our system and how we're treating our foods. And so again, the whole basis of the place was to create a place where people could come and experience joy, and that would make the world a better place. And it's doing that now kind of on all levels. And I was telling your professor this morning that what I want to start working on now and kind of years to come is we're in this big push for these lab-created meats.
Yeah.
You know, it's all lab-created, and you know, it's called, you know, soy burgers and this and that. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that's in there that is not organic. And if you look at it, lobster is about as organic as you can get. It's free-range completely. There's no GMO in there, no anything else in there, and it's a great protein source. So I want to start working on processing our lobster, doing it at a really reasonable cost, and being able to try to supply it to as many people as possible, and also working with seaweed, which conveniently you can pack lobsters in, because seaweed is 100% nutritionally balanced. It has everything you could ever need in it. And we have 5 different varieties that are right here that are local to this area of Maine. It's no short supply. And so to work with different ways so people can, I don't know, have more seaweed in their diet. You can get some kind of better things than what we're getting in our grocery stores, and where it's just something that everybody has access to. So we're working on those ideas too. But that is pretty much, in a nutshell, the story of our lobster sedation and what we do and why we do it.